The other thing I'd like to discuss in the consumer behavior topic is basically about the consumer decision-making process. Now, this one it shows you a bit of illustration about the Blink H2O bottled water, right? And they used to run the campaign "Sexy Drink" until they got criticisms of being sexism at that time. So yeah. Okay, so this is the one I'd like to discuss, and the buyer decision making process. Okay, so we have 5 stages in terms of buyer's decision making process. Okay, so we start with what we call as the need recognition. So we start with the need recognition. In the case of need recognition, this is the stage where consumers are aware of the gap, okay, between the desired state and the actual and the actual stage. Okay. So what drives them to be aware? What drives our consumers to be aware of the gap between the desired state and the actual state? It could be driven by external factors, such as they look at their friends, or they look at the marketing mix variables, the campaign that we run, for instance. Remember the model of buyer, buyer behavior that we discussed, the ASR model, or it could also be their internal drive. Okay, if we go back to the motivational theory, for instance, it could be the internal motivation. Okay, to like hunger, for instance, or thirsty, for instance. Okay, that drives them to be aware of the certain problem happens here. Okay, and the next stage is basically the information search. This is the stage where the consumers conduct some research to find the information. Now, the thing I'd like to highlight is basically basically revolves around the sources of information that our consumers may research. There are 3 of them, but the 2 main ones that I'd like to discuss with you. The first one is the commercial information, the commercial source of information. They include the advertising campaign of the marketing organizations, the websites, and any information that the organization publishes. Okay, now that gives our consumers the official information as the foundation for our consumers to conduct their research about our brand or about our offering. Okay. The second source of information is personal network. Okay, so consumers may also contact their relatives, their friends. Hey, do you know this brand? I'm thinking of buying a car, and I'm thinking, you know, either Honda or Toyota, for instance. What's your recommendation? Okay, now these 2 sources of information are different, and they have different roles in influencing consumer decision making. The commercial source of information provides our consumers with the official information that consumers can research, as discussed before, while the personal network actually provides the consumers with information that is considered as more reliable. Okay, therefore it will be more convincing for our consumers. It will be more convincing. Okay. Yeah, exactly. So the web networks now. Web networks is interesting. Is an interesting one, Simon. You could consider that as the commercial network. Blogging, for instance, you may do some blogging. You may look at some bloggers, for instance, bloggers review, especially when it comes to buying gadgets, for instance. Hey, how would you review this, for instance? So that's you can argue that it is also part of the either commercial effort or personal network, especially if you know that one, if you know that person. Okay, right. And the outcome of the information search is basically option. Okay, so after we do the research, we have options. We may have 2, 3, or 4, maybe more options. Okay, and these options will be leading us to the next one, the next stage, which is basically the evaluation of alternatives. This is the stage where our consumers are evaluating, are judging, right? What what are the elements that they are going to review? It's everything, right? The marketing mix variables, the 4 Ps, for instance, okay, the dealer, right, the salesperson, right, everything, right, the price, product, definitely, right, the communication, the campaign, right, the brand reputation, everything, right. They will judge everything, the pluses and minuses of everything related to their own situation. Okay, so the purpose of the evaluation of alternatives is to narrow down the options. If our consumers come up with 3-4 options in the previous stage, in here they are looking at 1 or 2 or maximum 2 options. That leads us to the purchase stage. In the purchase stage, they make the decision. Yes, I'm going to buy this. Can they still change their mindsets? Yeah, can they still change their mind? Yes, they can. Okay. In fact, some retail stores in Australia offer, if you change your mind, you bring it back, we will refund. Okay. So that's the purchase decision that our consumers make. Now, post-purchase evaluation is actually about the consumers. Evaluation of their own purchase, whether they like it or not, whether they're satisfied or not. Okay, and there is a study suggesting that if the value of the purchase is quite expensive, there is a tendency that the consumers will reinforce their evaluation. Okay, will reinforce in the post-purchase evaluation. They will reinforce, yes, I make the right decision. Okay, now the question for us is, would consumers go through all or every single stage thoroughly in all purchase occasions? What do you think? No. Okay, fair enough. Okay, in what occasion that they would not go through every single stage? Low risk. Okay, good, fantastic. If you already know the brand, okay, fantastic, good one. Okay, at least I don't. Okay, fair enough. Need to act quickly. Okay, fair enough. Impulse purchase. All right, fair enough. That leads us to impulse purchase. Sometimes, you know, at the cash register at Woolies and Coles, we find Tic Tac, for instance, or chewing gum. Hey, I want that, and you know, we just put it in our purchase then. Okay, that's impulse purchase, impulse buying behavior. Okay, you're correct, guys, and spot on. And look, there are several types of decision making. The first one is extended decision making. Extended decision making. This is the stage where consumers will go through every single stage comprehensively. Every single stage comprehensively. When do they do that? If they think the risk is high. If they think the risk is high, then they will do that. Okay. So what risk do we talk about? It includes the social risk and financial risk. Okay. If their purchase give them high risk, then they will review every single stage here. Okay. Car, for instance, is an example. Buying house is another example. They do research. They are aware of the problem. They do research. They juggle research, right? And until they make their purchase and post-purchase evaluation. Okay? And the next one is habitual decision making. Okay, which is basically about risk that is low, considered as quite low. Okay, so they're not going to go through every single stage. They may skip 2-3 stages. Okay, so they may be aware of the need. I'm running out of breakfast cereal, therefore I need to buy the breakfast cereal. Do they do some research? Well, not really. Okay, do they evaluate the alternatives? Not really, unless they find a new brand just launched. This is new brand. Why don't I put it in my trolley? But they're not going to do it comprehensively. Put it in the trolley. That's it. They purchase it. Okay. So that's habitual, based on the habits, and they also have the previous experience. Okay, as you also mentioned, previous experience, previous information. So they rely on that one. So therefore, they're not going to go through every single stage here. Okay, and the last one is actually limited decision making. Okay. In the case of limited or decision making, the risk is considered as moderate. Therefore, they are going to go through all stages, but not comprehensively. Not comprehensively. Okay, and again, since the risk is not that high, they go through every single stage, but not comprehensively. So the question is, what do consumers use to judge whether it is going to moderate or risk? Well, that goes back to the perception of the consumers, right? Some consumers may say buying a laptop is quite high in terms of risk. Some other consumers may say it's moderate in terms of risk. Okay. All right. So that's basically the main topics I'd like to discuss in terms of the consumer behavior. Any questions, guys? How does the behavioral economics affect consumer decisions? Could you let me know more about that, Pablo? Okay. What do you mean in terms of the buyer consumer behavior? Or look, the behavior economics are basically and consumer behavior are two different things basically. The consumer behavior is actually about how the consumers are making the decision in their purchase, right? Whilst the behavioral economics is about the economics of based on the behavior of the consumers, how they behave in the market,